Hello everybody, my name is Ben Butler, and today I'm going to be reviewing Although of Course You End Up Becoming Yourself, A Road Trip with David Foster Wallace by David Lipsky. This book is 320 pages long. It includes a foreword and a preface written by Lipsky to contextualize what the book is about. So in general, this book follows David Foster Wallace, one of the most acclaimed authors of the 1990s, during his book tour for Infinite Jest, which is a 1,000-page avant-garde fiction book widely acclaimed as one of the best books of the 20th century. And David Foster Wallace was an author. He wrote some journalistic essays for Harper's Magazine and Rolling Stone, among other magazines. And he went to Amherst College. He went to Harvard for his graduate degree in philosophy, but he dropped out. He was institutionalized while he was at Harvard, and while he was there, he went on an antidepressant. And a lot of this is included in the preface, but Lipsky was a Rolling Stone journalist who wanted to follow Wallace on his book tour, the end of his book tour for Infinite Jest, the last 5 days. And Lipsky was initially going to publish it as a profile piece, a feature in Rolling Stone, but he felt very strange about the intimacy of what he had written and found out about Wallace, and he felt weird about writing something that such an acclaimed author would end up reading and potentially be disappointed about. So Lipsky never filed it, and then in 2008, David Foster Wallace unfortunately committed suicide, and Lipsky decided, with the permission of Wallace's family, to publish it as a memoir. And I'm reading this book for the first time for MND 305, a course that I'm taking at the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications. There is a movie about this that I do want to watch. It's basically a one-to-one translation adaptation of Although of Course You End Up Becoming Yourself. It features Jason Segel as Wallace, and it features Jesse Eisenberg as David Lipsky. And I would say that this book is a fantastic example of anecdotal and colloquial and conversational reporting. It's published as a transcript, so it's entirely a conversation between Lipsky and Wallace. And this is an interesting format. I haven't read anything that is an extensive transcript interview. I was expecting to read this and kind of have it be condensed a bit more, but it's pretty one-to-one, just exactly what Lipsky had recorded on his tape recorder. There are a couple points in the book where there's a tape break. This is most notable, in my opinion, towards the midpoint of the book. Wallace starts talking about AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is a pretty major part of Infinite Jest, and it's unclear, and this is a privacy thing, it's unclear if Wallace was in AA himself, or if he just did an extensive amount of research. But there's a tape break around this point where Wallace ostensibly tells Lipsky his experience with it, which is pretty interesting. But Lipsky does a really good job of respecting Wallace's privacy. That would be a great reporting lesson that I got from the book. There's a lot of intimacy in this book. They discuss a lot, ranging from Wallace's personal relationships, there are rumors that he was a heroin addict, which Wallace completely debunks. And Lipsky is very gentle in dealing with these complex subjects, and as a result, Wallace becomes very forthcoming. And initially, there's some awkwardness, like Wallace is kind of resistant at the beginning of the book to getting into a lot of this stuff. He's very jokey. He kind of plays off a lot of stuff ironically as almost a shield. And then when Lipsky starts to emphasize more with Wallace starts to open up about his interpretation of Infinite Jest, as well as some more personal stuff. And there's some really strong quotes that Wallace gives. Wallace was obviously a pretty smart guy, in kind of a very somewhat pretentious way, but also just a highly academic way. He was just clearly thinking on a plane of like academic interpretation about a lot of stuff, including entertainment, including the internet, which was very new at this point. This came out in the interviews were conducted in 1996. The book came out in 2008, but the interviews were conducted in 96 around the point that the internet started. And all of that kind of comes together very effectively. And as Wallace continues to open up, the two are just able to dialogue in an incredibly effective manner. There are points where Lipsky even is forthcoming about his own life to help Wallace understand where Lipsky is coming from. Lipsky explains that, his mother was an artist, and some other aspects of his background that Wallace then connects with and explains about, his own background. His parents were both academics. They both taught at universities. His mother was a philosophy professor. His father was a philosophy professor. His mother was a sociology, I believe, professor. And all of that is very fascinating. That kind of interplay between the two is, I would argue, one of the strengths of the book. It really demonstrates that effective reporting is a two-way street. Obviously, it's not about the journalist. It should never be about the journalist. But in order for a subject to open up more, it's better to treat them as people. And it's very clear that Lipsky had a couple things prepared, to ask him about. Lipsky had read Infinite Jest, so Lipsky asked a ton of questions about Infinite Jest. But Lipsky really goes wherever Wallace goes with the conversation. And Wallace, again, goes all over the place. I think one of my favorite quotes in the book comes at page 86. Wallace is extensively talking about, he's using candy as a metaphor for entertainment consumption. And he basically says that while entertainment consumption like television or movies is effective and enjoyable or whatever, it's not really something that's lasting. It's very fleeting. And this is a huge theme in Infinite Jest, but he says this: at a certain point, we're going to have to build some machinery inside our guts to help us deal with this. The technology is just going to get better and better and better, and it's going to get easier and easier and more convenient and more pleasurable to be alone with images on a screen, given to us by people who do not love us but want our money, which is all right in low doses, but if that's the basic main staple of your diet, you're going to die. In a very meaningful way, you're going to die. And then he follows up by saying, for us, it's going to be that at a certain point, we're either going to have to put away childish things and discipline ourselves about how much time do I spend being passively entertained, and how much time do I spend doing stuff that actually isn't all that much fun minute by minute, but that builds certain muscles in me as a grown-up and as a human being. And if we don't do that, then A, as individuals, we're going to die, and B, the culture's going to grind to a halt. Because we're going to get so interested in entertainment that we're not going to want to do the work that generates the income, that buys the products, that pays for the advertising, that disseminates the entertainment. And this is a great representation of the way Wallace thinks about things. I've read Infinite Jest, and Wallace does have this kind of like A to B connection, and it's throughout the book. There's a lot of like this so that in the way Wallace tells Lipsky a lot of this information. And an insight that I gained is I gained a lot of insight just from Wallace's interpretation of culture and society. It's very, very prescient. It's very predictive. I think Wallace had a lot of accuracies. I think if Wallace were alive today, he would see the internet, and I think it would really bug him, the state of the internet. He predicts a lot of stuff such as virtual reality in the 1990s, and says stuff like virtual reality, for example, is going to actually completely gag us and completely limit us of our capability to interact with each other as human beings. And then towards the last third of the book, Wallace stops kind of getting on his soapbox a little bit. He kind of pivots more, ironically, actually, he's very, very tuned into entertainment. He talks about Alanis Morissette pretty extensively, and how like he has a big crush on Alanis Morissette at the ending of the book. And that's fascinating to me because it's almost like a tragedy. Like, you have this guy that's self-aware of, the negative ways to consume entertainment, and yet he's consuming entertainment voyeuristically. He's like, Alanis Morissette's beautiful. I have a poster up of her. It's a little creepy. I'm not going to deny that, but it's almost, it takes on an ironic symbolism. And I think other people, not just me, other student journalists, could take away from this book with an attitude of extensive research. First off, I think Lipsky did a fantastic job of researching Wallace's background. He knew Wallace had been institutionalized during graduate school. He knew a little bit about Wallace's family background. He knew a significant amount of stuff about Infinite Jest. He knew a significant amount of stuff about some of the essays that Wallace had published, including an essay at the beginning of 1996, before Infinite Jest came out, called A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, which is about Wallace's extensively negative experience on a cruise ship. This was a hugely popular essay, and it kind of set up the whole Infinite Jest hype train. So Lipsky did a ton of research and asked Wallace about this, but simultaneously Lipsky doesn't, stick to his guns. He really does let Wallace guide the conversation. He lets Wallace just go wherever the conversation needs to go, and as a result, there's just a lot of really intimate detail, and this is, it feels like if you were having a conversation and interfacing with somebody in the highest potential way. It's like the most enthralling and enjoyable conversation with somebody that you could ever have, and it's happening over 5 days. The whole book, 320 pages worth of just really, really good conversation about whatever, and it goes all over the place, and that can be kind of hard to follow sometimes, but it's pretty clear to me why this couldn't really be published, because Lipsky would have had to cut out a ton of pretty awesome detail in order to focus this feature, and it really would have suffered as a result. I think it's much, much better as an extensive piece of journalistic like a journalistic book. I think it's much better as a journalistic novel. And overall, on a scale of 0 to 10, I would give this an 8.5. I think that the book was a little too difficult to read at some point, which is ironic considering that Infinite Jest is one of the most difficult books to read, and I've read it and I enjoyed it. This kind of, at times, the conversation breaks are abrupt, and Lipsky does that in part for privacy. He does that in part because they're traveling while they talk, and so they can't always be on record, but that kind of makes it difficult to read. I do wish it had been a little more condensed. However, I do understand why Lipsky didn't condense it. This was a fantastic interview and a great tribute to Wallace after he, unfortunately passed away. And I think that a lot of what I got out of this book was, it helped me understand Infinite Jest a bit more, but it also helped me understand Wallace's career. It helped me understand kind of a lot of what made him tick. And I think in the future, if I read any of Wallace's stuff, I will remember kind of the concerns and the things that were on his mind at all times, in the way that he kind of approached the world. And overall, that's why I would give this an 8.5. I would recommend this to anybody who's looking to get into conversational journalism or feature journalism. It's not really an investigative thing, obviously. It's more about, it's a profile, so, it might not be the best book for somebody that wants to get into news, but for someone that wants to get into sports, this would be a great book to read, because Wallace was almost like a rock star of, fiction, or a, superstar athlete of fiction, and doing extensive research on anybody in the arts, entertainment, culture, society that you're going to do a profile on, doing this extensive research, and then also letting them guide the conversation, because you never know where that might go. Once you're on the record, you never know where that might go, and that might yield a lot of great results. And so anybody that's looking to get involved in profile writing should definitely take this book as a standard to hold yourself to. Thank you for watching. I'm Ben Butler, and that was my book review of Although, of course, You End Up Becoming Yourself, A Road Trip with David Foster Wallace by David Lipsky. Thank you.